So now we are done with the configuration and the setup of Keycloak within our Spring Boot and Angular application. So here, as you can see, we configured our Keycloak and it manages and handles localization with three languages that we set up in the configuration as like Arabic, English, and French. And also we see here that we have the login interface with the social login like GitHub, Google, PayPal, Microsoft, and we can enable more and more about that. Also, we have the forget password, remember me functionality, as well as we can create a new user. And again, as I mentioned, so here it supports all these localizations or languages that we configured within our Keycloak. So now let's go quickly within the registration process. So here, let's call this one just a test user, and the email I will use, for example, test user, and again I will use yopmail.com. So also meanwhile we configured that the application will send an email or an activation email, so to keep the same logic and the same process we did before. So let's agree on the terms and conditions, and here let's click on register a user. Again, we have the first step is we need to update our account information. So here for the tab we can keep the first name and last name as test, and let's click on submit. Then the next step, we need to activate our account. So let's go to yopmail.com, and here all I need to do is to filter for my test user. And here we see that we received an email from Alibu. This is based on the configuration that we did together. So here we need to click on this link to activate the account. So now the account is activated, and based on the authentication flow we defined together, we need to set a new password. So let's set a new password and click on submit. And here also you can see that we can log out from all the other devices when we change or update our password. So let's click on submit, and now we are redirected to the books page. So now we have our application, we have books, we have returned books, we can create a new book, and we can do all the same as before. Alright guys, hey, welcome back to this new video. So today's video is something that you've all been waiting for, and you all requested it since quite some time, and now here is the answer. So in today's video we will implement and we will set up Keycloak within Spring Boot and Angular application. Before we dive in, before we start implementing, let me first tell you something. So I know that I provided more than one video about securing an application using JWT authentication or JWT token, but I mentioned this before so many times, and I will mention it also one more time. Securing an application, I'm talking mainly about Spring Boot applications or any other type of applications, depending on the technology that you want to use. So securing your application using JWT is not really recommended, to be honest. And also it's not one of the best practices. And like the reason or like the proof why is, for example, Spring does not have a default or a built-in implementation for JWT. So what we did, it was mainly 100% made by us. So like it was like handmade or homemade implementation for JWT token, because we know the secrets and like the recipe of the security. We know how security filters work. We know how the security flow work with Spring Boot, and so on and so forth. So that's how we were able to build a JWT authentication mechanism or flow. So now I would recommend, and for me, like the best recommendation is to use an auth provider or identity and access management provider. And for this case, for me, like I recommend the open source and the free tool, which is Keycloak. So you can use it. And also, if you are not familiar with Keycloak, so this video is for you. I will guide you to the setup and the implementation of Keycloak within Spring Boot and Angular. So like it will be a step-by-step guide. So let me tell you what or how this will be. So first we will integrate Keycloak within our Angular application, and I will show you what you need to configure, what you need to create, and how things work. All right, so like we will do that step by step, like as always. Then we will upgrade our security in the backend. So like we will be working on the book social network application. So we will upgrade our security from JWT security, the manual implementation, to integrating and using Keycloak. And for that, I will explain to you the whole flow, or the full flow, or the full authentication flow, starting from the user sending a request or requesting a page on the Angular application, and how all this flow goes from the browser until the backend to get the data or to persist the data, and so forth. And then when it comes to backend, so since we already have something already in place, and when I first implemented the application, I could implemented it in the beginning using Keycloak, but I wanted to show you in case you want to upgrade from different authentication mechanism or flow or JWT or something else, and how to integrate Keycloak. So like I will show you what are the needed changes, what are the needed configurations, what you need to do, what you need to change, and so on and so forth. So like it will be a full guide as always, and step by step. And of course, as you know, it's beginner friendly. But this is not the end of the story. Of course, we will dive deeper and deeper into the Keycloak server configuration. So like we will play with almost all the options in the Keycloak UI administration, or the Keycloak administration UI. So I will show you how to configure Keycloak, how to play with the users, the roles, groups, realms, also clients IDs and secrets, how to enable social authentication, since you always been asking about we want, or like how to integrate social authentication. So Keycloak, it's just like magic. It's just a button you need to press and you have everything like you saw in the introduction of this video. Also, I will show you how to configure the realm, how to activate or to enable the localization, how to enable multi-languages, how to also create your own and custom keys and values for different things. So like it's more than this introduction. I don't want to make it so long. So follow along, and believe me, every word and every step in this video is super important. So I really don't recommend to skip any second of it. So now, before we start, if you're new to this channel, just go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Also share this video with your friends, share it on social media, and let's help this video reach more and more people, and let's spread the knowledge all together. So now, with no further ado, let's get started. First of all, let's have a look on what we built so far. So the application that we built together, now we will talk mainly about the authorization and the authentication process. So we have a dedicated page to log in the user, and another page where we can create an account and also validate the account using the password or the activation code that will be sent via email. So here also, if we have a look on our application, so here I have one user already created, and here we can see the list of the books, we can see my books, my returned books, and so on and so forth. So the application that we built all together. So now let me log out my user, and let's introduce what we will be building in this part. So now, instead of using a custom login and registration pages and mechanism and relying on the JWT, which I mentioned before, it's not really recommended when we want to go to production, because JWT is not really secure, and even Spring does not have and provide a built-in process for JWT. So what we built so far was only a custom implementation for our JWT authentication. So the best way to do is to go with an authentication provider and identity and access management, and in this case we will be using the open source tool, which is Keycloak. So now, before diving to the code and implementing Keycloak and setting it and putting it in place, we need first to understand the flow when we integrate Keycloak, how our authentication and authorization flow will look like. Alright, so let's dive and go to the next step. Alright, now let's understand the new authorization and authentication flow with Keycloak. So I tried to simplify this diagram as much as possible to make it easy to understand and also to make it easy to follow. So all you need to do is to follow the numbers of the steps we have in this diagram. So first, let's start with a user requesting a page. So it will request on the browser a page, for example, our localhost 4200/books, which is running on using an Angular application. So then the browser will perform a check since we will configure Keycloak for our front-end application. So what we will be doing next is to contact or to reach out to Keycloak and make sure if the user is registered or if the user has an active token or not. So here Keycloak will perform a check. If the user is not authenticated, what we'll be doing, we will send the user or redirect him to the login page, which is like by default we will use the default theme of Keycloak. So the user needs to type or to put his username, email or password. All right, so this is the first step. So here, as I mentioned, second step is check, then redirecting to the login page, and then the user needs to set or to type his username and password. After doing this check, we will check the credentials against Keycloak. So here, after clicking on login, we will send the request to Keycloak with this information, which are the username and password. So once the Keycloak checks the information, we have two possible options. For example, the first one is if the credentials are invalid. So we will display an error message telling that invalid username or password. Otherwise, if the credentials are correct and valid, so we will redirect the user to the requested page, which is localhost 4200/books, as you can see it in here. So this is not the end of the story. So here, when we open or when we try to load the books page, what we will be doing is we will send a request to our backend. So the backend also needs to retrieve or to send back the information or the list of books in our case. So here, as you can see here in the step number 8, the backend the front end will request the backend to fetch the list of books. So here we will request our API, sending a GET request, for example, localhost 8088/API/v1/books. And then on the backend, we have also another check process. So here, as you can see, the step number 9, we need to validate the token, because when we send this GET request, we will include the bearer token or the JWT token in the header request, as we did before in the JWT. So then we need to validate this token against Keycloak, since Keycloak is the issuer of our JWT token. And here we have two possible scenarios. So the first one, which is number 10, which is a token valid or a valid token. So then we will send back to the API that the token is valid, and then we will send back the list of books to the front end. Then we have the alternative scenario, which is the step number 12. And as you can see, like the success one is in green and the error case is in red. So here, in case the token is invalid, we will send back again to the API and we will tell it that the token is not correct, or the token has expired, or the credential is not correct, and so on and so forth. So like any reason to say that the token is invalid or is not valid. So in that case, we will send back an HTTP 403 to the front end telling that the token is not correct. So for example, in case the token is expired, so the token will go back to the front end, and then Keycloak will perform another check, and we will redirect the user again to the login page, since the token has expired or the session has expired for our user. So mainly, or like simply, this is the process of how the application, like backend and front end, how the application will be working using Keycloak. So as we did before within JWT, we implemented our validation process and how to set the connected user and how to update the security context. So now in that case, we no longer need to do any of that. All we need to do is to request or to contact Keycloak and make sure, or just ask Keycloak, hey, please check if this token is valid or not. And then we will get a response from Keycloak, and based on that, Spring and the security dependency will do the rest for us. So now we have our simplified flow. What we need to do next is to move on and start implementing and setting up Keycloak and migrating and upgrading our security from our classic or self-implemented security to integrating Keycloak. First of all, what we need to do is to prepare our infrastructure. So this means that we need to add a new service to our Docker Compose in order to configure and use our Keycloak. So here what I will be doing is I will add a new service after the mail dev, and it will be like this. So I will call it Keycloak, and here I will give it a container name, and I will call it Keycloak-BSN just for Book Social Network. And then I will use the image. You can also find this image on the Docker Hub, which is kai.io/keycloak/keycloak. And here we need to pass the version, which is, I think at this time, I think it's 24.02 or 24.03. So I think 02 also is one of the recent versions, so we can use that one. Then we need to expose some ports. So we will use locally the port 9090 over the port 8080, which is by default the default port for Keycloak. But locally, or on my local machine, or for my case, I will be using the port 9090. After that, so this is sufficient to start Keycloak, by the way, except one missing part. But when you configure it this way, and you start the container, the first thing that you will get is a page where you need to define the admin user for Keycloak, and you need to provide a username and password. But we can also do that using some environment variables, and the first one is Keycloak_admin. I will just copy it for now, and I will simplify it and use admin. And the other one is admin password, and also I will use admin for that one. All right, so after the environments, we need to assign this to a network. So for the network, we will use our Spring demo, which is the same network used for the other containers. Also, we can specify it for mail dev too. So let's say also network here, and then let's say Spring demo. So we will have all the containers running under the same network. All right, so after defining the network, there is one important command that we need to add, which is a command. All right, so for this command, we need to mention to Keycloak that we want to start our server, or we want to start Keycloak. So we need to pass this command start dev in order to run the Keycloak server. So now we have the configuration of our new service, and all we need to do is to run docker compose app. All right, so now I will open the terminal, and I'm located in here in the root folder of my application, where I have my docker compose YAML file, and all I need to do is docker compose app and -d to run it in a detached mode. So here what we have our container started, the same for the mail dev, and here we have also our Keycloak BSN container. So in order to check that, we can go to the Docker desktop, and here we see that we have all the three containers up and running. Now what we need to do is just to access our local host and then 9090, and we will see our Keycloak admin interface. So here we have an access. Okay, I think we made a typo, so let me copy this one, and Keycloak admin, yeah, okay, so I just inverse the O and A, so now this should be fine. Now I will do docker compose down just to bring down my containers, and docker compose up -d to start the containers once again. All right, so now let's go back to the browser and let's refresh the page. We need to wait a few moments. And now we have our page. So now to sign to the admin account, all we need to do is to run admin, or like to provide admin password. So here, this is the Keycloak. So let me zoom in a bit. So here we have the Keycloak admin UI. So here we have by default the master realm. Okay, so I already explained almost everything about Keycloak, about the realm, what Keycloak is, how it works, and so on and so forth. So please go ahead and check that video and come back to this phase. All right, so now all we need to do is to create a new realm. So the realm that we need to create is the following. So here, let's just give it a name, and let's call it Book Social Network. All right, so the realm, we give it a name, like you can give it any name you want, but in our case, we will call it Book Social Network. All right, so like setting up the realm and setting up almost everything is simple, just for the starting. And later on in this video, I will guide you step by step how to configure Keycloak from A to Z with all the things that you need. And also, if I miss something and you want to see it, please go ahead and drop a comment and I will explain it in the coming video in details. Alright, now all we need to do next is to create a new client. So the client will be the one that we will use to connect to our front end to the realm, and as well as our back end. So here I will just call it BSN, just as a simple name. And here you can also give it empty as like for the name and description, or you can also set it. So next, here what we want exactly. So if we want client authentication or authentication flow, direct access. So for now, let's leave everything to default. And later on, if we need to update something, I will show you what to update exactly. So now what we need to provide is our root URL. So the root URL should be the root URL for your front-end application. So the home URL is not required. And now we need to set up a valid redirect URL. So this one is super important, since this is what will happen when Keycloak login a user. So like, what is the redirection URL? And as you can see in this pop-up right here, so this gives you the information. So this is like the pattern can redirect to after a successful login. All right. So the /* here is super important. Don't miss that out. Also, we can set up the valid post logout URL when the user logs out. So this means we will try to redirect the user by default to the home page of our application. And for web origins, we can whether specify our local host or the port of our backend, or here we are just doing some dev and experimentation, so we can leave it to *. So * is not recommended for production here, as we did before or in the last video. So these are the allowed origins that we want to allow to access our client. So as I mentioned, let's use now *, and that's it. So now here we have all the information of our client. So here you can also go back to clients, and then you search for the client that you created, which is BSN, and here you will see all the details that we mentioned before. Here we can create also client roles, scopes, sessions, and here we have also some advanced configurations, like for example, if we want, for example, to set up a logo URL instead of using Keycloak, here we can also specify our logo URL or policy, the terms of use URL, and so on and so forth. Also, we can specify and configure the access token signature algorithm. Otherwise, like the default one will be used. And as you can see here, we have the list of all the available encryption algorithms. Then also we can specify the same for the ID token signature and a bunch of information in here. So we will explore this in details later on. All right, so now we are done with configuring our realm and our client. So for now, we will not do anything else. So just one small thing, I will go ahead and will create a user that we will be using all together later on. So here first, I will check this email verified. And for the username, I will say, for example, ali@mail.com, and the same for here. And here I will just give it a first name and a last name. So this will be just a user that we will create or we will use by default in order to showcase and show you the progress of our implementation. But our final goal is not to use Keycloak to create users, but we want to register users through Keycloak. All right. So I hope this is clear, but this is just a step that I wanted to show you, and I don't want to skip things or to do things in the background. So let's create a user. So this is our user. So now let's have a look how a user looks like. So here we have the details. So this is the ID of the user, when this user was created, and here we can specify some user required actions. So for example, let's say the user needs to update his password, needs to update his profile, verify email, configuring an OTP, and so on and so forth. So for now, as I mentioned, we will not do that, but we will set it up later on. And here we have the basic or the general information of our user. So the username is the same, or like we can set it to be the same as the email, and we have the first name and last name. Also here we have credentials. So we created a user, but our user does not have a password yet. So this is helpful, or this process is helpful for you in case you want to manage high-level users directly from Keycloak and not enable the registration from the registration form. And for example, imagine you have an application handling so many type or roles of users, and for example, for admins, managers, and super admins, you want or you have to create them by your own. So this is the process: how to create a user and how to set a password, also role mappings. And as I mentioned, we will see all this later on. So now let's just set a password. So here I will just give it password as a password, and here you can set it to temporary. So when this set to on, this means that when the user logs in for the first time, he needs to update his password. But for now, or for this case, or for this special user, let's say that the password is final, and let's hit save password, and now we have our password. Also, as an admin of the Keycloak realm, you have all the power and all the authorities to do everything. So for example, you can delete user, you can reset his password, you can reset the credentials, show data, for example. You can do anything you want. Like you can do, you can assign and unassign roles, and so on and so forth. So here, within this admin user, you have like all the power that you need to do anything. So you need to be careful, especially when you are going, or like when you go to production with Keycloak. All right, so now we have the basic configuration for our Keycloak. We created a realm, we created a client, and also we created a user. Now let's move on and start integrating Keycloak. And as we mentioned in the flow before, we will start with the front end, since in the front end we can see things first, and then we will configure the back end, and then we will start playing around and digging deeper into the Keycloak world. All right, as mentioned before, the first step that we will do is to integrate Keycloak within Angular. So first we need a package, or we need a dependency in order to help us or to allow us to communicate with Keycloak. So this dependency is called Keycloak-js. And here there is one thing which is really important when using these dependencies, whether in the backend or in the front end. You need to be careful about the version. So as you can see here now, like Keycloak, they released a new version, which is 24.03. So we can use it as well in the backend, also in Docker Compose, but we can stick with 24.02 since the changes are not that important. So here we need to pick the same version that we used for our Keycloak server. Otherwise, we might risk, or we might face issues of incompatibility between the dependency and the Keycloak server itself. So you need to be careful about that. So what we'll be doing, we will pick this Keycloak.js 24.02, and we will perform an npm install in our application. So not the backend, but I was just thinking about the IDE. So here, let me go to my book network. All right, so book network UI. Let me clean this, and let's install npm install Keycloak.js 24.02. So here, something important worth mentioning. So I'm starting from the main branch. So all the changes will be checked out in a separate branch, but from the main branch, not a different one. All right, so now let's go to our book network UI and let's check the package.json. And here we see that we have our Keycloak.js 24.02. Also, like with this symbol right here, it will also pull or use a later version. All right, so now we have our dependency ready to use. The next thing that we need to do is we need to create a service. So this service will initialize Keycloak, and it will connect our application to the Keycloak server and perform few actions. And we will see this in details. So the first thing that I will be doing is I will create a service. So here under my app, my source app, and then services. So let me navigate there. And all I need to do is to generate a service, and I will call it Keycloak. All right, so this will generate a file called Keycloak service. So it will be generated directly here, and I wanted to all right, so let me create a folder and let me call it Keycloak, and I will move these two files to the Keycloak folder just to organize things. All right, okay, so now we can open this service, this Keycloak service class, and I can make it full screen. All right, so now what we need to do within this service, first, I always mention that when we create something, we need always to link it. But before coming to linking the service, let's first explain or talk what this service is about. So this is the Keycloak service that will be running, that will be executed when we start up or bootstrap our application. So when bootstrapping the application, we need to tell our Angular application that we have an authentication provider, which is Keycloak in this case, that we want to use, and you need to perform all the checks against Keycloak server. All right. So now what we need to do next is to go to our application or to our app.module.ts, and we need to link our service there. All right. So let's open our app.module.ts. Let me make this full screen, and here we have the interceptors, we have everything. So now we need to add a new provider. So our new provider, so you know now how to add a provider. So just like using the same thing, and in the same way we will provide. So here what we want to provide, as I mentioned, we want our Keycloak service to run when we bootstrap our application. So it is of type app initializer. All right. So then we have a dependency, like this initializer depends on our Keycloak service, the one that we just created. So this means, so this depth, this means like we want to do a dependency injection. All right. And here, instead of using a class, I will use a factory. So a factory, this means this is just a method, and I will call it KC factory, KC for Keycloak. And then of course we need our multi-true, because it's not the only app initializer that we have right here. So now if we scroll to the top, before this ng module, all I need to do is to export a function, and I will call it KC factory. And this KC factory, as we said before, we need to inject a service, which is our Keycloak service. So this is why we need these steps. All right. So this dependency, this means that Angular will inject a Keycloak service in this KC factory. And then all we need to do is to call our KC service. We need to return, and then arrow function, and we need to return our KC service.init. So we don't have this method yet, but we will create it right away. All right, so now let's go back to our service and create this first method, which is the init method. All right, so here I will make it async. So like it will be an async method, and then I will call it init. So here, first thing, we need to see that this error is gone, which is the case. Now we will not do anything. All I need to do is to console log this thing. So here I will say initializing Keycloak. So initializing Keycloak. Now if I go back to the browser, and if I go back to my Angular application, go to console and then user messages, we see here that we have initializing Keycloak. So this means that this service is running when we first start or bootstrap our application. So here, if I filter by info, we see here that initializing Keycloak. If I refresh, we always see that we are initializing our Keycloak. All right, so now let's go back and start implementing our Keycloak. All right, the first thing that I will be doing is I will create a private variable, and I will call it Keycloak, and it will be of type Keycloak or undefined. So like this variable can be also undefined. I don't know why I'm always making this typo. So also you can see that Keycloak is imported from Keycloak.js. Okay, so you need to be careful about this one. If you import the wrong one, so it will not. You might risk that it will not work. Well, it's not just a might risking, but it will not work if you import Keycloak from a different place. All right, so now since this one is a private variable, I will create a getter for it. Okay, so I will call it Keycloak, and then so this get is just to initialize this Keycloak variable. So now what I need to do, so I will do a test if I don't have this dot underscore Keycloak. So if this one is undefined, so like this is a singleton pattern. All right, so like I want to return only one instance from my Keycloak, and here I will just return this dot Keycloak. So now I want to perform an initialization of this Keycloak variable only if this Keycloak is undefined or null. All right, so this is why I have this test right here. All right, so now I will do this dot Keycloak equals new Keycloak, and now I need to provide few information. So the first thing, like here we have three main information, which is the URL, the realm, and the client ID. So the URL is our Keycloak URL, which is http localhost and then 9090. So this is our Keycloak server URL, and then we need to specify also the realm. So the realm that we created, which we called book social network. I hope I'm not wrong. So book social network, and the last one is the client ID, which we called it simply BSN. So here social, I made a typo. All right, so now if we don't have, or if this Keycloak variable is not initialized, this is how we initialize this. Then we move to the init method. All right, so now I will create a constant. I will call it authenticated. So this authenticated equals await. That's why I made it an async method. And all I need to do is this dot Keycloak. So now we need to use the method, not the field. All right. So we need to use the Keycloak because this one will initialize Keycloak. So if you use the underscore Keycloak, you will face an undefined exception. All right. So now all I need to do is to call the init method with few parameters. All right, so now here we have few options. So here we have an unload. So this means when we load or like unloading the application, what I want to do. So here we have two options. The first one is login required. So we will check if the user is already logged in or not. And the second one is check SSO. So checking the SSO means single sign-on. So like we can also set up a single sign-on for different applications, and the user, like using the same browser, might be also signed in a different application using Keycloak. So when we come back to the book social network, we see that the user already has an active state or an active session. So we don't want, or like we don't perform a new login each time. But for this one, we will use a login required property. Other than that, you have also many other properties that you can set. For example, the ID token, locale, logout method, refresh token, and so on and so forth. But the minimum required, or like what is really required, is the unload one. So if you use check SSO, you can also add some other properties, and for that you can check whether the documentation, or if you are interested in seeing how single sign-on works, I can also create a dedicated video for that. So now what I will do, I will just console log a few things, and here I will say authenticating the user. Let me fix the typo. And now, because this authentication, as you can see, is of type Boolean, so if authenticated, I will just do something, or like print something like this. So here, user authenticated. All right. So now I will go back to the browser and let's check what we have right now. All right. So now you see that we no longer have our login page. So now it's automatically redirecting to our user. And here if we see, well, I think we lost the logs since so we lost the logs of our localhost since we are no longer under our localhost. So now if I use the user that we created earlier, so this user, maybe let me split it to to this way. By the way, Keycloak is 100% or like fully responsive, as you can see in here. All right, so let me clean this. And now if we go back here, you see that this is the user that we created, and I created it only for this case to show you how things work. All right, I think I lost my page. Okay, so let me open again this, and now let's try to log in within our user ali@mail.com. So here ali@mail.com, and the password is password. And then I click on sign in. So we see here authentication or like authenticating the user, and here we have user authenticated. So this means that the information that we provided to Keycloak are correct. Okay, so now let's try with a different or like with an incorrect user. So here let me try to clean up all the local storage, or let me show you how to log out a user. So now if we go here to the list of to the clients, and then BSN, we have sessions. All right, so sessions, this means what are the active sessions that we have right now. So here, this is the user. So what we can do, we can sign out our user. All right, so the user has no longer an active session. If I refresh again, I'm back to the login interface. So if I type anything and click on sign up, we see that and we have invalid username and password. So this is so far the flow that we explained in the beginning of this video. All right, so far everything seems to be working fine. I can also remove these logs. And now if the user is authenticated, so now you might ask the question, or I think you already have this question in mind, how to retrieve the profile information or the user profile information, as well as the token, how to redirect to the login, account management, and so on and so forth. So we will see all that in details. So now what I will be doing, I will create, first of all, here in this Keycloak, I will create a small model. All right, so I will call it user profile.ts, and then I will create a simple class. So here export interface user profile, and here I will have a user name, which can be null of type string, and also I will have email. So these are the information that we can get from Keycloak, by the way. So I'm not inventing anything, I'm just getting the information from Keycloak. So here we have also first name. So on Keycloak, first name is with capital N. So also string, and we have, for example, last name, and also it might be undefined, since we can create a user without providing the first name, last name, and all this information. And finally, let's say we have also a token, and this token is also of type string. All right, so I just created a model to hold the user profile information. So like you can create it, or even you, like most of the cases you don't need that. But for me, I want to show you as much information as I can. So now once the user is authenticated, I will first create a private profile of type user profile. So user profile, or it can also be undefined. So undefined, this means that if we are not able to authenticate the user, this means that user profile is also undefined. So I will create here also a get method. So get user profile, or profile, simply profile. And this one, it will return user profile or undefined, as we defined it in the variable. So here all I need to do is return this dot underscore profile. So this is just a classic getter. So now once we go back to the init method, once the user is authenticated, I can load the user profile. So here I have this dot underscore profile equals, and here I need to perform a request to Keycloak. So I will call I will perform an async call, and it will be this dot Keycloak dot load user profile. All right, so we have user profile, we have also user profile info, and so forth. So here I will just cast it to user profile, since it's not by default the same type. All right. So then also let's say this dot underscore profile dot token. Now this is how we get the token. So for now, like for this demo, we will not need the token, or like we don't need to store the token in the profile, but just in case you need this information. So how you get it? So it's this dot keycloak dot token. So you have the information right here. All right. You have also another information called parsed token parsed. So like with this token parsed, you can get all the information that are available within the token, like the subject, the issue issued at, also like the expires at, and so forth, like the realm access and all this information. So let me bring this back to token, and let's move on to the next part. So then after implementing this init method, we need also a method that will allow us and let us call the login from Keycloak. So I'll create a method called login, and here all I need to do is to return this .keycloak.login. Then in the same way, I will do a logout, since we have, or like since we implemented also a logout functionality in our application. So here simply we need to do, or like we need to perform this .keycloak.logout. And for the logout, we can, even the same way for the login, by the way, we can specify some actions, which are the redirect URL. So for example, once the user is logged out, I want to redirect my user to HTTP localhost and then 4200, for example. So this is, by the way, the property that we defined here in our realm. So if we go back to settings, and here we have the logout URL somewhere. Yeah, so post logout URL. So it's exactly the same. All right. So, but as I mentioned, I just want to show you more and more how we can configure or how we can use Keycloak. I think we are done with the service. What we need to do next, even like the front end now is ready to use everything. So what we need to do next is to move on to the backend and implement all the changes that we need. But before that, I think we still have one small thing which is super important. So before moving on to the backend, I just came back to my mind. So here we have a few things. We have, first of all, our guard, our authentication guard, which uses our token service. All right. So the token service stores the token in the local storage and gets the token from the local storage validated, and so on and so forth, which is correct for the case of using JWT with like a custom or a personalized implementation. But when it comes to Keycloak, things are exactly. It's 100% different. Like I wanted to make it a little bit lighter or softer, but no, things are 100% different, and Keycloak manages and handles tokens differently. So that's why instead of using in the authentication guard, instead of using this token service, we need to use the Keycloak service. So this is the first part. The second part is we have our interceptor. All right, so for the interceptor, in the same way, we are using the token service in order to get the token and pass it as a bearer token. So this stays the same except this part. All right, so first let's start with the authentication guard. So guys, I hope I'm not going fast. So if I'm going fast, go ahead, have a break, pause the video and come back and continue later. It's not a race. The most important thing is that you understand what we are doing. All right, so now let's start, or let's continue implementing the guard. So here, instead of injecting our token service, I want to inject my Keycloak service. All right, also I need my router, and then here what I have if my token dot is valid. So this one I can also rename it to Keycloak, just to be compliant. Keycloak service or token service, both are the same. And now instead of using this is token expired, I have to use this .keycloak, and then we have a method called is token expired. All right, so this is the only change when it comes to this authentication guard. Nice. Now we can move and fix the implementation for our interceptor or HTTP interceptor. In the same way, instead of using this token service, we need to use our Keycloak service. And let's rename this one to Keycloak service as well. So Keycloak service. And now instead of using the Keycloak service.token, all I need to do is to use Keycloak service.keycloak.token, and that's it. Also here we can use this writing right here, and we can say token. So it's just a small enhancement in our code. Alright, so now our authentication guard and HTTP token interceptor. So here let me, before moving on to the backend, let me remind you, or let me highlight something. So maybe if you forget to update the guard first, and you try to go to the front end and log in with the application, you might face like an infinite loading of the page. So like the page will be refreshing infinitely. So this is due to not correctly setting up the guard. All right, so please be careful and follow all the steps that I'm implementing. Even if you are setting up this from scratch, please, if you have a guard, or if you already implemented, or if you want to implement a guard, go ahead and follow the steps one by one. All right, so now we are done with the front end. Well, maybe if we are missing something, we will do it later on. But now, like I would say 99% we are done with the front end. We can move on and see what are the implementation, or what are the changes that we need to add to our backend application in order to integrate it within Keycloak. So now let's move on. Well, I thought that we are done with the front end, but I just forgot a few small things, or like two small changes, and mainly they are in the components. So the first thing that we need to do is to update our login component and menu component. So here I will open this one, and I think we have the menu right here. So for the menu, what we need to do, we have already the logout. So here in the menu.component.ts, we have this logout function. All right, so like it was not the best implementation, but I was already having the plan to migrate to Keycloak. So this is what we will be doing. All right, so first of all, I will need a constructor. And here I need to inject my Keycloak service of type Keycloak service. And here in this logout method, all I need to do, instead of calling this local storage remove item and then window location reload, all I need to do is to make this one async. And then all I need to do is to call my Keycloak service.logout. All right, so this is the first change in the menu. And then what we need to update next is our login component. All right, so I need to open the TS and the HTML file. So in the login component.html, I will comment out everything. All right, so like we don't need to have anything, or like a custom login component, and even we can later on completely delete the register component. All right, so now in order to comment an HTML, so it's the tag symbol, or like the lower like the less than symbol, and here in this way. All right, so now we are commenting out all the login component.html, and now we need to adjust also our TS file. So for the TS file, first I need to implement the onInit method, onInit interface, and I need to add the implement interface. All right, so now we can comment out and delete all the unnecessary stuff. So for example, in here, I can remove all this, and I will create a private variable, and I will call it Keycloak service of type Keycloak service. And then all I need to do is in the onInit method, I will first make it async, since the methods that we are calling from the Keycloak service are async methods. So first I need to await this .keycloak service.init. So I need to initialize it, or I think this one is already done in the function in the app initializer. So we will check later on if this poses an issue or not. And then we need to await this .keycloak service.login. So here every time we come to this page, we need to perform the login, and we see if the user is already logged in. Otherwise, we just need to redirect the user to the login page. So now I guess we can completely remove these two methods. So we no longer need the login, neither the register method. So we can completely remove or just comment them out. So let me just comment them out, and let's keep them in the code just in case. And here, of course, this ng on init is async, and it should return a promise of void. All right, so that was the issue that we saw in here. And then also we can whether remove or leave these two attributes, like the authentication request and the error messages, since they will be 100%, or everything will be 100% handled by Keycloak. All right, so now I think now we are really done with the implementation of the front end, or the migration of the front end. So it's fully migrated. Now we can move on to the backend and start implementing the backend integration for Keycloak. So now moving to the Keycloak integration for the backend. So we can reduce this UI, and now let's move to the backend. So the first thing that we need to do is to update a dependency. So here we see that we are using Spring Boot Starter Security. And now instead of using the Spring Boot Starter Security, since we are using Keycloak, so Keycloak is part of the OAuth 2 security. So here, instead of using that, we will be using Spring Boot Starter OAuth 2 resource server. So we need the resource server, since we only need to connect our application to our resource server, which is Keycloak. All right, so this is the first change. We need to update our security. So here in the project, you will not be facing any compile issues, since this OAuth 2 resource server also has the Spring Security Starter in it. So like we have all the Spring Security dependencies in here. All right, so now the next step is to move and add some properties. Well, not exactly adding, but updating our properties. So let's go ahead and open our application.yaml file and change few things. So application dev, and here where we have the definition of all the Spring related properties. So here we have Spring data source, JPA, mail. We can leave everything together. And now we can remove this application. So this not the application, but the security part, as well as I think we can remove this mailing front end, since the application will no longer handle the email sending. So we can remove this. And now in here, so under Spring, so like Spring and then OAuth 2 and then resource server and then JWT and then issuer URI. So this is the property that we need to add. So again, Spring security, OAuth 2 resource server, and then JWT and issuer URI. So here all we need to do is to provide the URL of our issuer. So the issuer is like who is, or like which server or which resource server is responsible for issuing a JWT token. So here in our case, it's http://, and then localhost and the port 9090, and then realms. So like we have, or like we can have multiple realms, and then the realm name, for our case, it's book social network. And that's it. So like for the properties, this is the only change that we need to perform. All right. So then we need to adjust our security configuration. So now let's close this one and open our security config.java. So for the security configuration, we will get rid of all of this. All right. So first, let's start by changing this. So we need to introduce some small changes there in order to tell Spring what is the security that we want to use right now. So now, as you can see, I delete session management, authentication provider, and the add filter before. And instead, I will use OAuth 2 resource server, since we are using a resource server. And here I will create an auth, since it should be a Lambda expression. And then I will say auth.jwt, and then I will get a token, and now all I need to do is to call the token.jwt authentication converter. So here in this JWT authentication converter, what we need to do, we need to convert, or like we need to create a class that is able to convert my token. Well, not exactly the token, but we need to perform some conversions. So what we want to do, so for example, or mainly, is to convert the Keycloak roles to Spring roles. All right, so you know Spring always use role underscore something. So this is what we want to do mainly. All right, so for that I will just say I want to use a new Keycloak. So this is a class that we will create right away. New Keycloak JWT authentication converter. So this is how I will call the class. So it takes no parameters, and now I will create a class in the same package. All right, so here we see that Spring automatically understands that this is a class that should implement the converter class or converter interface, which extends this. So let me first clean up these imports, and also in here, so like because it's too long, and we can import this one from OAuth2 as well as this abstract authentication token. And here we don't need this one, since we know that we want to use an abstract authentication token. The same, we need to import our converter, which is from Jakarta, jakarta.persistence.converter. Nope, sorry, it should not be Jakarta. So we are talking about security right here. So it should be from org.springsecurity.core. Let me check. All right, so here okay, so this is annoying, and I will import it manually from here. All right, so the package should be org.springframework.core.convert.converter. So the interface is called converter. So now all I need to do is to implement the method. So the method that I want, or like the only one that I need to implement, is this convert method. All right, and this convert method, it passes as a parameter the JWT. So this is a representation of my JWT token that I will receive from my issuer. All right, so now just this one, it's telling that this one should not be null, and I will use the non-null annotation, the one from the Spring framework. All right, so now let's go ahead and implement this convert method. So now what I want to return. So I want to return a new, and the object is called JWT authentication token. All right, so this JWT authentication token takes three parameters: the JWT, the authorities, and the list of authorities. All right, so a collection of authorities and a string name. So now the first thing is our source. So this is our JWT, and then what we need to do, we need just to collect or to convert our authorities, or like the roles and the authorities that we will get from Keycloak. We need to convert them and pass them to this new authentication or JWT authentication token. So for that, let's create a method. So a private collection, and this private collection, it will be of type anything that extends the granted authorities. All right, so I think you are familiar with the granted authorities since we used it so many times in the JWT videos. So I will call it extract resource roles, and we need our JWT object, and let's call it JWT. So now this is just extracting, or like it will perform an extraction and a mapping at the same time. So first I will create a variable, and I will call it resource access. So I will explain later on what this means. Okay, but why waiting? So let's do it now. So now if I refresh the page, and if I use ali@mail.com and then password, and here let me open the network tab, and if I do sign on. So here we have a token, and this is our token. I can copy the value. Now I can go to jwt.io, and let's see what the token contains. All right, so like we see, we have the expiration, the issued at, the time when the authentication occurred, the JWT ID, or like the unique identifier for the token, network, and so forth. And among this information, we have the realm resource and resource access. So this is the realm resources, and we have the resource access. So within the resource access, we have an object called account. And within the account, we have a list of roles. So this is from where we need to extract the roles and convert them to Spring roles. All right. So you know, Spring roles by default, it's role underscore and then the role name. So this is what this method about, like the method that we are implementing right now, is only to extract from our JWT token this object and then extracting the account and the roles and map these roles. All right, so this is why it's called a JWT authentication or a Keycloak JWT authentication converter. So now going back to our method, so now you know what resource access is. So here all we need to do is to create a new hash map, and this hash map, we can skip the type and we can give it the jwt.getClaim. So in order to get the claim called resource access, all we need to do is to get or to extract it or to get it using jwt.getClaim. So it's called resource underscore access. So here again, let me remind you, so it's called resource access. All right, so let's go back here, and now I will call something, I will call it eternal equals, and now I need to cast it to a map of string and then a list of string. So string and a list of string, let me import this one, and then we need my resource access dot get. So here again, let's go back to the token, and you see that this account is an object, so like it will return a list of a map of string and a list of string. So this is what we are converting right now. All right, so now what we want to get the object called account. Then we have var, let's call it roles. Now we have the list of roles, which is my eternal object dot get and then roles. So now we have our list of roles. Maybe let's separate these lines. Finally, all I need to do is to return roles dot stream, and then I need to map, so just performing a mapping, so role, and then what I need to return, simply a new simple granted authority, and here I need to pass a role underscore, so this is the Spring specific part, plus, so I will concatenate it with my role dot replace. So here I want to perform a replace. What I want to replace this dash with an underscore. And then of course I need to collect, and then using the collector dot to set instead of to list, because I want to have a set of roles, so I don't need to have duplications, and I can also add static import to this one. All right, so this method, like it's simple and easy, and it's like also like I explained what is the role, or like how we are extracting the data, from where we are extracting the data. So now it should be so easy. Next, let's go back to this object right here. So as I mentioned, we want to return the resource, and now let's do a stream.concat. So we want to concat two streams. The first one is an object called JWT granted authorities converter, and then convert. We can call the convert, and here we want to convert our source. All right, so this is the first thing, and of course dot stream, since we are performing a concatenation, and then we call the extract roles within our JWT. It's called source, and then of course dot stream. And finally, all I need to do is to collect dot to set, and that's it. So now we have our converter already implemented. Now let's go back to our security configuration and let's perform some cleanups. So here we no longer need the JWT authentication filter. So let's go ahead and remove this component. And also, so let's just remove the component and then we can remove it from here since it's no longer used, and also the authentication provider. And I know all these are existing, or like they live in my bean configuration, or like beans config class. So I will go to the beans config class and start commenting out what we don't need anymore. All right, so here we have this user details, also the authentication provider, we don't need it anymore. The same for the authentication manager and the password encoder. So I will select all this and then select the menu code. And here I have comment with the block comment. So it will comment out all this. So all I need to leave is this auditor aware and the course filter. All right, so this is what we need to leave in this beans configuration class. So also let's locate this file. We see also here we have, I think it's in the security package. Yeah, here we have also this user details implementation. So this user details implementation, we no longer need it, and we will run the application and see if we have something which is not working. The same for the JWT service. So I'm just commenting out service, and then we will clean up and delete all the unnecessary files. So now what we need to do is just to run the application and make sure that everything is up and running. So now, okay, so it seems that we have, yes, of course. So here we have password encoder, which is used in the authentication service. Now let's go to the auth package. And here we can remove, like, by the way, we can just remove this auth package, but I will just do it step by step. So this authentication service, I will just remove the service, so it's no longer a Spring Bean. So these are just requests, and here we have the controller. I can also remove this one and this one. All right, so we no longer need the authentication. So it's all commented out. Let's rerun our application and see if it will go up and running, which is the case. So now the application started in 3 seconds, in 3.38, and everything seems to be fine. We don't have any exceptions. We have nothing. Now I will close this one. I will go back to the browser and I will try to connect my user and try to fetch the list of books. So now this is my browser. This is the application. Let me bring this one down. And here, let's go back to /login. And here our user is connected. And let's see. Okay, maybe let's manually disconnect this user. And we have sessions. Let's refresh. All right, admin, and then client, BSN, and then sessions. So we can log out or sign out this user. And now let's perform a login. So it's ali@mail.com and then password. So sign in. Okay, so now it's automatically redirecting to /login. We can fix that in a few moments. So I will just try to reach books. So here we have the books page since we are already authenticated, but as you can see in the network, we have an error. So the error saying that cannot cast class alibu user.user to something. And this is coming from here. So let me close all these tabs. And this is coming from book service, for example. And in the book service, what we are doing is that we have, or like we are injecting the authentication. And now from the authentication, we are trying to convert it to user and then to use the user ID. So now, since our user is no longer managed by us, it's no longer managed by the application. So we are not supposed to have a user entity at all. All right, so like user entity and everything that goes with, which is roles and also the tokens, I guess, if I remember correctly. So we have user and we have token, and we have roles. So we need to clean up all this. And of course we have, or like there are some few changes that we need to do. But before coming back to the backend, there is something that I said that I will do it, and I will do it. All right, so now let me refresh the page, sessions, let me refresh it. I will sign out this user, and let me explain the process again, why I need to do this. So again, I will connect with my user and password. So now when I click on sign in, you see now we are redirected to books, since that was the last redirection URL. But in order, or like to better handle this redirection, and mainly if, for example, I try to reach the local host 4200 without specifying any URL, I want always to redirect my user to the books page, for example, since I know it's already guarded, and in that place I know that if the user is not authenticated, we will redirect him to the login page, and so on and so forth. So I will open my app routing module, and here before the login I will add a new route. So this route, it will have a path empty. So anytime or each time the user tries to hit an empty path, so what I want to do, I want to perform a redirection where I want to redirect to books. All right, books means this URL right here, or this route right here. And then there is one option which is important, which is a path match. How I want to match this path. So I want it to be a full match. All right, so if it's empty, so I want to go to books like with a full match without changing, or like without having any extra information. So now if I go back to the browser, you will see now we are automatically redirected to the books page without performing or without doing anything. So now we still have this 500 in the backend, and this is what we will fix right now. Okay, let me close this and this. So the first thing here, we see that we have user. All right, so the user should no longer exist. So what I will be doing, I will whether delete it completely or just commenting out this table and entity annotation, as well as the entity listener. I no longer need it, but I know that the user is linked to the books. So the roles I don't care, because I will also delete it, and also I need it in the book transaction history. So here, if we go to the book, what we have in here, so here we have this mapping between the book and the user. So the book and the user, I know, like for this case, so we have this relationship between the user and the book. So all I need to do is to remove it, and what I need to do is really nothing, since in my base entity I have an information which is the created by, because this will introduce an issue in the book repository. If I open my book repository, so here we no longer have this book owner. All right, so this book owner, we don't need it, since we can change this one. So now, in order, or like in place, or instead of having a user, since our user is no longer managed by the application. So this is what I mentioned, what I mentioned before, and I mention it again. So our user is no longer handled and managed by the application. So we don't have an entity called user at all. So we have already in our base entity something called created by. So now in order to fix this query, all I need to do is to pass, or like to use created by instead of the owner, because we know the created by will be set only when a user, or like the connected user, will perform the creation of a book. All right, so this is the first fix. Then what we need to do next is to try to fix these things. All right. So now, of course, we will see a lot of errors, since we have the owner almost everywhere. So we will fix that. So let's start from the beginning. So here I said we no longer need the owner, since we removed this property. So we need to comment this out, and later on we can clean up and remove this. So the next place is update searchable status, for example. So this update shareable update shareable status, all I need to do is to get the owner ID, right? So the owner ID is the connected user. So now let's see how we can get the connected user. So now instead of initializing a user object, I will just comment it out or like completely remove it. And here we know that the book.getOwner.getID is replaced by .getCreatedBy. And here, instead of using user.getID, I will use my connected user.getName. So getName will return the ID of the user. So it will exactly return this ID. So if I go to the users, it will return this value right here. All right. So the authentication object.getName will return this ID. All right. So now let's continue fixing the rest. So now it seems like it should be easier. So here, instead of getOwner, it will be .createdBy, and again here connected user.getName. So let's move on to the next one. Here I comment this out, and then createdBy, and here connected user.getName, and the next, so here the same connected user.getName. What is the next one? Yes, so here we still have an issue because this method is already borrowed by user. This one also relies on the user.id, which is part of the transaction history. So here first I need to change this one to a string. I know this might be a little bit complicated, but believe me, it's not. So here all I need to do is to change this one. Instead of using the user, all I need to do is to create a new field, and I will call it private string user ID. And now I will just give it a colon, and I will give it a name, user underscore ID. So this is the only change. Now if we go back here, we can use the user ID instead. All right, so we will go back and fix this one. So maybe let's do it also right now. So here we have also user ID, and this one user ID should be also of type string. The same for find all books by owner ID, since we don't have the owner anymore, so we replace it with created by. And of course, don't forget to change the user ID type from integer to string. So like I'm doing this, or I'm performing this, and I will show you what we need also to change more, since here, as you can see, this is a unique unified ID, or like the UUID. All right, so that's why I'm changing everything to a string. So here again, user ID, let's remove this one and let's use a string in here. And here we no longer have the owner, we use the created by instead, and a string in here. So let's double check. So we have string user ID almost everywhere. So we are done with this one. Let's go back to the book service. So this method is already fixed, and here this one is fixed. And now here, instead of user object, I need to use the user ID, which is connected user.getName. Since let me remind you, in the book transaction history entity, so this entity, we removed the user attribute, or like the user field or the user relationship, and replaced it with this user ID. As again, let me remind you, we no longer have the user entity in our backend. So I will perform a deletion for everything later on. Let's go back to our book service and continue fixing this. So this one, right, where is it? Yep. So here again, we remove this, and here we don't have the owner, so it's created by and connected user.getName. So here you see this this highlight right here, because the created by is of type integer, and here the getName is of type string. So yeah, I was going to do it later, but let's do it now. So here again, this created by, it should be of type string. as well as the last modified by. So here the created by should be the user ID, and the same in here should be user ID. That's why I'm changing both of them to string to match this connected user.getName or the ID of the user. Let's continue. So here again it's connected user.getName, and in the same way here created by and user or connected user.getName, and we can comment this out. The next here also user ID, let's say connected user.getName. Since we changed the repo, so that's why we no longer have these error messages. And here let's also comment this out and fix this one. So here connected user.getName. I think we are left only with one small thing to change, which is this one. Let's comment this out and replace this one with connected user.getName. All right, so now I think we are done with this part. Let's see what is left in here. Okay, so it's claiming about this connected user is never used, so it's fine for us. So now first, like after these many changes, let's try to restart our application and see what will happen. So now we still see that we have few issues. Again, in the feedback service, since also in the feedback service, we are using the connected or the authentication object. So let's go ahead and fix this one. And here again, the created by, we use it against the connected user.getName. And I think that's it for the feedback. All right, let's restart the application and see what will happen. So here to book response, we have the owner. So for this one, I will just comment it out for now. Like I will not display the owner, and I will show you later on how we can do that. Okay, so now I think we have something wrong with one of the repositories. So let's read the exception. And here user token user. Okay, again, so now let me close all this. And the error, or like here the error message or the exception. So the exception, it says that association between user token.user, because like target unknown entity. So since the user is no longer an entity, so let me remind you. So the user, we removed the entity and the table annotation, and the token relies on it. So here all I need to do, first, I will also remove the entity annotation from here. So it's no longer entity, so it will no longer claim about this. I will also do the same for the role. So let me fix it. So for the role, let's remove this 3 annotation. So I'm just removing this 3 annotation because they are the markers for JPA, not JWT, for JPA to know if the class is an entity or not. Again, we have here the role repository, so it should not extend a JPA repository. So let me do it this way, and let's also comment out this find by name. And I think we need to do the same with user and token repository. Exact. So here, comment this out, and let's comment also this out. This will introduce also a compilation issue, since we use this find by token in other places. So, and let's comment this out. Now let's see what we have left with the compilation issues. So we have the book network API, so we can comment this out. So like this is the command line runner that we created in order to initialize a user role by default. But I will show you later on how we can configure the roles in Keycloak, and how also to assign a role automatically to any user that needs or wants to authenticate. Not authenticate, but register, sorry. Okay, so here we have this user details service. So now I guess I can comment, or like I can fully comment this out. So let's comment this, and again code and comment with block code. So the error is gone. as I mentioned, we will clean up all this. Now we have the authentication service. I will comment it all. So like I will comment everything. So code, and then comment with block code. I will do the same in here for authentication controller. I will comment it out all. So comment with the block code. And now we should no longer see any compilation error, hopefully. All right. Also, now the application is up and running. So now we are left with only one small update. So let me stop the application. Let's close all tabs and let's open our beansconfig.java. So here we have our application auditor aware. So our application auditor aware is of type integer. And since we changed the type, we changed the type of the user, so the ID is no longer integer, so it's of type string. All right, so we need to perform also a small update in this application audit aware class, and this one, it should be a string. Also in the same way here, we need to make this one a string type, and here we have this get current auditor. So here everything stays the same. So here we need the authentication, and if the user is not authenticated or is anonymous, and here instead of just returning this user principal, all I need to do is to do my authentication dot get name. All right, I can improve the imports, and now let's restart the application, and I think we are able now to test it against the front end. So the application is up and running. Now let's go back to our browser. Let's refresh this page. Okay, so let's log out the user. So this is also, by the way, from the user you have sessions, and you can sign out the user also from the user interface. So again, let's do ali@mail.com, and let's use password as a password, and let's do sign in. So now if I open the network tab, refresh the page, okay, we still see that we have one issue. I think we forgot something. Let's go back to our IDE and check what is the exception, or where the exception is happening. Okay, so we forgot it in this find all books, and here we use just authenticated or connected user dot get name, and of course we need to change this one, and here it should be a string user, and here we change it in here, but we forgot to change it in this place. Let's restart. Let's clean up the console, and now I think it's time to refresh the page, and here we go. So now the application is running, and we are able to retrieve the information of the books. So this book was created by another user, and I think here if we have the information of who created that, well, I think not. So now let's go ahead to my books and create a new book and see. So here let's call it Keycloak maybe, and Alibu as an author name, one ISBN, share me, and let's choose any picture, and let's perform save. So the save, I think it's not working, maybe we missed something, so save. All right, so here we have something again. So now let's go back to our IDE. I will clean it up, click save again, so just to have fresh exceptions. So now we have again in the book service. So yeah, we missed a few things. So let's update this one, and now so it's only about the file storage service that we implemented in order to upload or like to create a folder for the user ID, and so on and so forth. So here in the same way, connected user dot get name, and of course here the save file, it needs an integer user ID, so I can change it to a string and see what needs to be changed. Also I think this is the only change. So again, I think we can remove the book ID from here since it's not used. So I will just delete it just to optimize a little bit. And now let's restart the application. So we can keep the front end as it is, and we can perform the save once the backend is restarted. So I will clean this up, and now let's click save again. So the book is saved. So if we check in here, but we have one issue, we will fix it. I think we forgot something also. Yes, we forgot something in here. We need to remove this one, but let's make sure that the book was correctly saved. First, let's open the database, and then we have books. So here we see that we have the book. So this is the new book, and it's called Keycloak. So I think it was saved several times. It's not a problem. And here we have the last. Where is the created by? Yes. So here we have this created by. So by the way, I can delete the 3 of them. So let me delete these ones. And here we have the book. Okay. So now if we go back here, and let's first fix this small issue. And here, of course, we have this with owner ID, and this with owner ID, I need to use my connected user dot get name instead. And of course, we need to fix this one. So here it's just string instead of an integer, and here just instead of getting the owner and then get the ID. So let's remove the ID and use the created by instead. All right. So now if I restart the application, let's see, let's still explore, or we can perform like a global search for all the methods or all the locations where we have the user.getID, but it's fine. Like we can do it this way. So let me refresh the page. Now we see that we are returning the list of books of the user. So for example, let's try to archive a book, unarchive it, share a book, and share it. So the application seems to work fine. Now if we also go back here, let's try to borrow this book. Okay, so now borrowing the book does not work. So let's go back to our IDE and see what is the issue. So by the way, when you perform a migration, this is the way it's done. So like you try to change things, and then you need to test the application, unless you have like really solid unit tests. So this will help you a lot figuring out what are the things or like the services and the updates that you need to perform before going to production. Okay, so let's check the exception. So here we have select count transaction history with ID. Okay, so no operator matches the given name and argument type. You might need to add explicit typecast. Okay, I think I know the problem. So what I will be doing, okay, so let me first explain you the issue. So the issue is if we check the book in here and we check the columns, and here we have the owner. So the owner ID is of type integer. So somehow, okay, so let me open the book table, close others, close other tabs. So first, we no longer have this book ID, the owner ID, sorry. And here we have this created by, which is of type integer. So somehow we managed to force the types, but when we tried to read the data, we were not able to read the data since there is like a comparison or like type mismatch. So string is not compatible or like is not or cannot be converted to type integer. So what I will be doing, I will stop the application and I will erase everything. So in case, for example, imagine we are in production before like performing this change. Let me explain or give you some advices. So imagine, for example, that the application is already deployed and contains data, and we decided to integrate Keycloak within our application. So before doing that, like you can do it in the code, but don't forget one important part, which is first migrating all the users from the application, means like from this users table and so on and so forth to Keycloak. Once you migrate them, you will have an ID for each user. Then you need to perform update queries for each table that uses this created by, or that uses this user IDs. So this is what we missed, and since our application is still already in the development phase, so we can play around and do whatever we want. So now I will use my application.yaml file, and here for the data source I will use create, and I will just rerun the application. So I will start from a fresh state. So this will introduce us to the next part of our video tutorial for today, which is how we can register a new user. Since now we only have one user which is available in our application, in our Keycloak admin interface that we created manually in the beginning. So now I want to enable the registration, the email validation, and all these parts. So now let's go back to the application. If I refresh, I should no longer see any books, and also I should be able to create a book. So let's call this one, or let's perform a test again, and here Alibu, some ISBN, and share me, and let's see, or let's use any picture, save. So the save works perfectly fine. So now what I will do, just to continue testing as much as possible our application, I will create a new user. I will say email verified, and I will call it, for example, john@mail.com, something like that, and then john@mail.com, John Doe, for example. No groups, nothing, just create, and I will give it a credential. So password, and then password. So it's not okay, so let's keep it temporary, and let me show you what happens when you set a temporary password for your user. So I will save it, save password. Now, since we implemented the logout, so if I click on this button right here to log out my user, so here I think we have an invalid redirect URL. So if I go back to my clients, BSN, and I'm not sure which one is invalid. So, okay, let's remove this and see. I'm not sure whether it's this one or the one that we configured in the code. Okay, so maybe the one in the code. So here, let's open our Keycloak service, and let's go to the logout. All right, so again, let's try to reach our application. Maybe you still have an active session. So here, let's check the sessions. Yeah, this one is not signed out, and perform. So I will try again to check the logout issue. So password, and then sign in. So here, let's say books, for example, and if I try to log out, so we still have an invalid redirect URI. And in the settings, okay, so I will completely remove this logout URL. Okay, so maybe I will not waste a lot of time in this. Okay, let me again, so sessions, let me log out this user and give it one last try. Otherwise, I will try to tell you the reason. So login, ali@mail.com, and then password. So here we need also to, once the user is logged in, we can also perform like a correct redirection to our application. So yeah, exactly. So that was from this code right here. So like for the logout, just remove the redirect URL, and this should work fine. So now our user is signed out. What we want to try right here is to log in with this john@mail.com, and since we set in the credentials, we said that the password is a temporary password. So let me show you when I try to log in with john@mail.com and then password. So I click on sign in. So the first thing, I need to update my password. Since in Keycloak I defined the password as a temporary password, so the user needs to update his password. All right, so here again, password. Also, if I chose, for here you can see that we have books. So here, for example, if I chose to for the user, here, as you can see, we have the update password. Since the password, we set it as a temporary password. So that's why this is one of the required user actions. Now, for example, if I say that the user needs to update his profile, needs to do so many things. So here, let's choose update profile. Let's log out and let's try to log in again with John Doe. So password, and then I click on sign in. You see here, I need first to perform a password update. So password, submit. So password, I made a typo, I guess. Yes, now I need to update my account information. So to update the account information, I need to validate my email, first name and last name, and just click on submit. All right, so now we integrated Keycloak with Angular and Spring Boot, but we are not done yet. Why? Because here we only can sign in. We don't have the ability or the capability to register or to create new account like we had before. All right, so what we will be doing next, we will go ahead and enable this, and I will show you how to configure so many things, and also we will play around in details with Keycloak. So follow along and let's continue. All right, now let's go ahead and play a little bit and dig deeper into the different options and the different tools and the different ways of configuring Keycloak. So first, let me refresh in here and let me connect again with my admin user. So now we will try mainly to play around this. So now also, if I go back here, I'm signed out. So now let's play with this. So here we see we are in the users menu. The first thing that we need to do is to go to the realm setting. So we already discussed before that we want to enable the registration of a user. So in order to do that, all we need to do is to go to realm settings, and then we have this login tab. So in this login tab, you see that we have user registration, which is turned off. So I will just turn it on and the changes are automatically saved. Now, if I refresh the page, we see that now we have this footer right here. So if I click on register, we see that we can specify username, password, confirm password, email, first name, last name, and so on and so forth. So this will allow us to create a user. But before performing or testing this registration, let's see some other options. So I will go back to the sign to your account, or like to the sign in interface, and here we see that we have also forgot password. So the user can be able to perform or like to reset his own password. So I will set this one to on, go back to here and refresh. So here we see the link that the user can reset his own password by providing his email address, and an email will be sent from Keycloak to the user in order to reset his password. But sending the email needs some configuration, and we will do it later on. Also, among the options, we have also the remember me. So if we enable remember me, we see now that we have this checkbox remember me. So for example, if you want the browser to remember you or like to keep your session active, you can also enable and set this one. So it depends on your flavor, or it depends on your need, whether you want to activate it or not. One other option. So here we have these email settings. So here, when we click on register, we see that we have username, password, confirm password, and email. So now we see that we can specify a username and an email. We can disable this username by telling Keycloak that we want to use the email as the username. So if I enable it, now if I go back to the register, we no longer see the username field. So we just need to provide the email, password, confirm password, first name, and last name. So now let me show you how we can organize this, or like let's do it just in a few seconds. So here in also among the things that we want or we can enable is the email verification. So we can also enable this one, but we will enable it once we configure the email properties. So here we have this verify email. Also we see here edit username, so this means that whether the user can edit this username or not. So if this username is editable or not. So here I wanted to show you something before and I forgot about it. So here if I connect to my account, and here this is the logout. So what I will be doing, I will go, let me close all this one and keep this Keycloak service. So we know that this is the logout button, but Keycloak also, among the things that he offers to us, is an account management interface. So for example, if you want to allow the user to update his own information like first name, last name, email, and all this, and like changing the password and doing all this, so it's also doable by enabling or like by connecting to the account management. So here, so for example, we will use the logout, we will use the same icon. So instead of calling the logout, I will call another method called account management. All right, so for that, later on, like what you can do, just add another button to for the user in order to be able to access the account management. So now we changed the action of this button instead of login. So now if I click on it, I'm redirected to the account management of the user. So here we see the personal information, the username, which is not, which we cannot change. We have the email, first name and last name. And also we have some other account security, for example, the sign-ins. This is the history of the sign-ins. Here we can also update the user. He can update his own password. So for example, I will change it. Well, I will keep the same, but I will pretend that I'm changing the password. And also I can check the sign out from other devices. So here, like you see the power or the real power of Keycloak. Imagine that you want to implement all this by your own. So like it will be a real nightmare. So Keycloak can do all this for us. So here we can, for example, check sign out from other devices in case, for example, the user he have a doubt or like he say maybe my password was leaked. So he can change his password and sign out from all the other devices. So if I click on submit, I'm redirected back to this interface. Also, the user can set up two-factor authentication. By the way, I provided also a video on how to implement that by your own, but don't do it, like don't implement things on your own, since you have this really nice tool, this Keycloak tool, and also like I'm providing you with all the information and all the things that you need in order to use Keycloak like a professional. Alright, so now you can just scan and enable the two-factor authentication, but we will not do it. So here we have the device activity, and here are like the information and the dates, like getting them from the server and so on and so forth. And here are the application that are used by or like the application that are used by the user. So for example, we have the account console, BSN, and so on and so forth. Once we are done with updating our profile, all we need to do is just back to BSN or like back to our application, and it will redirect us back to the main application. So now let's go back to the code. I will duplicate and comment this out so you can use it, and I will bring it back to logout. All right, so now let's continue exploring our Keycloak. So here we played around with the email settings, also the user info settings. Also, for example, you can check this verify email on and off. So like the user needs to verify this email, and we said like once we configure the email settings, we will also do that afterwards. All right, so now let's continue with the registration process. So first, let me show you how to configure this email. So here we have this template, for example, and the first thing that we need to set the sender email. So for that, let's say, for example, contact@alibucoding.com, and here, for example, the first name, let's say Alibu. And for example, if you want to add a reply email, you can also set it. Reply to display name, you can also set it. And for example, like you can configure whatever you want. So now let's set up the SMTP, or like let's set up the connection and the authentication. So now what we will do here, I will use smtp.gmail.com. It's like the same configuration that I used in the CI/CD pipeline implementation video, so you can go ahead and check that one. So like, by the way, I will not provide my password, so all you need to do is to do it on your own. So here we can enable SSL and the start TLS. So here the authentication, I will set it to enabled. So I will use my password. Sorry, not the password, but my email, and here I will set my password. But before that, so to test the configuration, your user admin should have like you should configure the email address for the user admin. So let's go ahead and set it. So here these are the information of our username admin. So for example, here I will use one of my email addresses, and here let's say my first name and last name as an admin. When I save them, so save, and then if I go back to Realm settings, if I refresh the page here, by the way, you see that the name has changed. Now let's go back to the email settings and let's do that again. So contact@alibucoding.com, and here, so let's say just Alibu, it's just like tests. So this is the port, enable SSL and enable start TLS. And now let's enable the authentication. And here all we need to do is like to type the email and the password. So here let's click on test connection. So test connection will perform or will send an email to the email account that you specified for your admin login. So let's save this configuration. So now we have everything set up and enabled. So if we go back to login right now we can enable this verify email. So let's go ahead and test these changes first. So I will log out the user and I will try to register a new user. So for example, I will use john@yopmail.com. By the way, Yopmail is like it provides fake email addresses that you can use. So for example, here if for example, let me search for Alibu. So here, if I search for alibu@yopmail.com, so this gives you like a fake, well, it's not a fake, it's a real inbox, but you can use it, but never use it on production or like for trusted websites. So here I will use Alibu instead of John, and here I will set a password, again a password here, and here let's say for example Alibu and then Alibu. So now if I click on register, let's see what will happen. So here we see that you need to verify your email address to activate your account. So now if I refresh in here, so let me zoom in. If I click on refresh, we see that we have or we received an email from Alibu, and this is the email address that I provided in the configuration. So here it says someone has created a Book Social Network account with the address, with this email address, and so on and so forth. And here we need to click on this link. So like here you don't see the styles and so on and so forth, because as I mentioned, it's just a temporary or a fake or a shared email address. So here if you go back to Yopmail and type in name, you will see all the inboxes. So here let's click on link to email address verification, and now we see that the account is now enabled and we are automatically redirected to our book application. So now we can close this one. Let's go back to the administration, and then let's click on users. So here we see that we have this alibu@yopmail.com, and if I click on it, you see that it's enabled. And here we did not specify any required user actions. I will show you how to configure that later on. So here we have our user, we have the credentials, we don't have yet role mapping, so this is also something we will see, the same for the groups, and so forth. And we have an active session, so I will just sign him out since yeah, it's just for testing. Now let's go back to our Realm settings. Alright, so now we check the login, we check the email. Also, we have another tab. So here we have the themes tab. So this themes, you can specify which theme that you want to use. So Keycloak provides us with two themes. So the Keycloak theme is the one that you see in here. So this is the Keycloak theme, and you have the base one. So the base one is just a raw page, and it just looks so ugly. So also, like I'm thinking about creating an open source project to create Keycloak themes. So I will make this announcement later on, or in a separate video, to tell you about it. So here let's use Keycloak. Also for the account theme, you can use, for example, you can choose among the themes. The same for the admin, the same for the email, and so on and so forth. So let's save, let's refresh, and this is how this looks like. All right, so now what we have next? So we have keys. We can skip this one because it's too advanced. Here we have events. So the events, it's also another topic, but events is, for example, if you want to capture events from Keycloak and do something with it. All right, so this one also I will try to make a dedicated video to showcase how we can create a custom events within Keycloak. Also, don't forget to comment out if this is something interesting for you. All right, so now let's go back, refresh this page, and let's go back here. Now this is important. So we have locales or localization. So by default, Keycloak supports so many languages. So for example, like by default it's disabled, I will enable it, and here we see English. So for example, let's add French and Arabic. All right, so now, and here we can decide or define the default locale. I will save the changes. And now if I come back and refresh this page, you see now that we have this locale. So for example, if I change it to French, we see that this one is updating. Also Arabic, so also it's also updating. The same for all the pages that are provided by Keycloak. All right, so Arabic is so nice. So let's go back to English so everyone can understand what we are doing. Cool. So also with localization, we can do a lot more with that. Among the things that we can do is this. So here you see always that this is displaying the realm name. But what if we want to display our name, or for example, the company name or the project name? How to do that? Simply, all we need to do, here you see we have a display name. So here we can, so I think this is part of another project, but here, for example, we can define a variable. So here we have a display name. So we can create a property. So for my case, for example, before I called it realm.name, and here the same. So this is the HTML display name, realm.name. So I will save these changes, and now I will go back and refresh. So here you see now it's called realm.name. So it's trying to find a property or a locale property for this realm.name. If it finds it, it will display the translation or the localized message. Otherwise, it will just display this realm.name. So now let's see how we can localize a message. So go back to localization tab. And then we have this realm overrides. So for example, let's choose French. And here for the key, if we use, for example, the one that we chose, realm.name, and here, for example, let's say, for example, bonjour la vie. Just a simple message just to show you how this works. So now if I refresh, and if I switch to French, you see that now we have this message. Okay, so if I go back here, and also if I provide something in Arabic, and again the same key and the name, I don't know, like okay, so like never mind about what you see in here. I guess only people who speaks and read Arabic, they will get it. But this way, like this is called baccalaureate, and this is like the study level we have in Tunisia. So let's click on create, and now if we go back here, refresh the page, now if we select Arabic, we see that we have the name getting displayed in here. So sorry, I just don't want to waste the time and go and find like proper names, but just accept it as it is. All right, so in the same way, you can also add as many translations as you want. Next, so here we have security defenses. So this is also something super advanced, and I will skip it for now. So here, same for the session. So here, this is how we can configure the single sign-on session settings. So for example, how long I want my token to be valid, like the session idle. So for session idle means that if the user, for example, does not use the platform or that does not use the application for 30 minutes, this means that we will log out the user, and so forth. Here also for the tokens, I will skip it for now, and client policies the same, and here we have the user profile. All right, so for the user profile, you see here, let me link it. So let's go back to English. So now if I click on register, we see that we have email, password, and first name, last name. So this is the same order. So now if I change this to first name, last name, username, and email, and now if I go back here, refresh, you see that the order also changes in here. All right. So I think, and I hope you got this one, because like it's super easy. Also, you can create new attributes in here. So I will also show you how we can create attributes or special or specific or extra attributes for the registration, how to use them, how to get them, how to display them in the token, and all what goes with it. Nice. Now let's move to the next part. So here what we have the user registration. So for this user registration, we have this information. For example, we have these default roles. So this means any user that will register a new account, he will inherit or he will get by default these roles. So for example, if we go back to this alibu@yopmail.com and we go to role mapping, we see that we have the default roles, book, social, network, as well as we have the inherited roles. So by default they are hidden, so all we need to do is to uncheck this hide inherited roles, and we see here it's these three are inherited from the account, which is in the realm settings, and then user registration, not client policy, and these are the roles that are inherited by the user. So now what if we want to assign a custom or a custom role that we create when the user registers? Like when a new user registers or creates an account, I want to assign him a role or like a default role. All right, so now let's go ahead and check that part. Now we are in the realm settings. Don't forget that. So first we need to go to realm roles. All right, so here these are the default roles that we have. So here mention that these are the roles global to the realm. So this means that each client, because here also within the client we have roles. Okay, so the realm roles are available for all the clients, not the opposite. So like the opposite is not correct. So for the client roles are not available in the different realms. So for example, if you create multiple clients, so each client will see only his own roles, but the realm roles are visible by all the clients. Okay, so let's go back to the realm roles. Since we have only one client and one realm, so let's define a role. So here, let's say for example, manager, and then save. Again, let's create another role. Let's call it user. And save. You can give it also description. You can specify attributes. You see who are the users assigned or like having this role. All right, so now we have two roles, for example, and let's create another one. Let's call it admin. So here we have 3 roles. What I really recommend, so when you create roles, just go ahead and create groups. So groups, they are nothing but containers to the roles. So here let me show you what this means exactly. So I create a group and I will call it admins. So admins, or like administrators, or call it whatever you want. I will create another group and I will call it users, and another group and I will call it managers. All right, so like this is the group of admins, managers, users, and so on and so forth. So for the users, let's start with the admins. So the admins, here we can, for example, we can also create subgroups, okay? But this is not important for now. We can create, or we can add members, or we can also add attributes, or we can, this is what we need to do, is adding a role mapping. This means that for the admins, if I can assign a role, so by default, like logically it should be admin. If I assign it here, so anyone or any user that I give him this or like assign him to this admin group, he will automatically inherit from the admin role. So like he will automatically have the admin role. So for example, when I manually create a user, I don't need to give him the role or like to assign him the role. All I need to do is to attach him or to assign him to a group. Let's go ahead and do the same with managers. So this role manager, and in here role user, and then assign. All right, so now for example, let's go back to this. So let's see that this user ali@mail.com, and let's assign him to, or let's make him join the group users. Let's click on join, and now if I show the hidden inherited roles, we see that automatically he inherits from the role user. All right, because he is already assigned to the users group. Now if I go back to the groups, users, members, and now I see, or like I can see all the users by group. So like as I mentioned, groups are just containers. Okay, so now this is clear. Now let's go back to the first topic. Let's go back to the realm settings, and let's go to user registration. So here, when the user registers, we can assign him automatically a role. So let's click on assign, and let's say by default, every new user will have the role user. For example, you can also assign multiple roles, but in this case, let's just assign one single role. Now we have the user role. Now I will go ahead and register a new user. Let me refresh my page. So let's call it test, and then test, and here let's say test. I just need to copy this one just not to forget it. Password, and then password, and then register. So now I need to verify my email. All I need to do is to go to Yopmail, go back here and replace this user, hit enter, and now we have this email received. So let's enable the user. So now the user is already enabled. Now if I go back to users in here, and we see this test, role mapping, display the inherited, and we see that he automatically inherits from the user role. All right, so now we saw how we can assign automatically a role to user. Now let's go back to our realm settings. So here under user registration, we have this sorry, I need to zoom out. I hope it's still visible for every one of you. So here, not in the realm settings, we need to go to the authentication. So for the authentication, we see that we have a list. So first we see that we have different flows. Among these flows, we have this registration flow that we saw here in our application. So let me sign out this user, and let's open again the registration page. Now let's go back here. We see that we have this bunch of information. So first, registration, user profile creation, password validation. So this is what we mainly do. And as you can see, they are required. Also, we have a reCAPTCHA and the terms and conditions which are disabled. So for example, if I enable the reCAPTCHA, I think this will not work since we need to configure it. Also, let's enable the terms and conditions. So now if I refresh this page, so here first it says that the reCAPTCHA is not required, but what we see also, we see this. So here we have these terms and conditions. We can define them later on in the configuration, and we need to agree or to accept the terms and condition. Otherwise, like, we will have this error message. All right, so let's go back and disable this one, and let's refresh again. So now if I try to register, we have all the required fields, and among that is like we need to agree or to accept the terms and conditions. So this is one part. The next one, if you go back to the authentication, here we have the required actions. So the required actions means what the user needs to do once he creates his profile. So here, let's check them one by one. So first we have update password, update profile, verify email, delete account, and so on and so forth. So here, let's say, well, for the update password, it's already enabled, but it's not a default action. So none of them are default actions. But let's see update profile. So this configuration is for all the users. All right, so for any new user, there is a difference between, for example, in here, if I try to add a new user, so here when we activated the locale, by the way, we have now, or like we can choose a locale for the user. So first, let's say that we want the user first to update his password, update his profile, verify his email, and for example, let's also say verify profile, and even if we want to, we can also configure the OTP. But let's stick with this list. So now let's call this user new, and for example, let's say new user at yopmail.com, and let's assign him to the group users. And let's create this user. So now the user is not configured. So let's also set a password for this user. So password and password, of course, temporary password, and let's save. Now let's go ahead and try to log in this new user at yopmail.com. And now let's use password. So when I click on sign on, first we need, like as mentioned in here, so the first thing we need to update the password. So the flow, or like the order, is already defined in this authentication in here. So we can change the order later on. But first, let's change the password. So of course I will use the same password, and then click submit. So here we see that we need to update the account information. So first name, last name, submit. And the next step is we need to update, or like we need to verify the email address. So now if I go back here and type this new user, and yeah, someone else is already using this. So here, if I click on Alibu and verify email, so now the account is activated. So if I refresh it, so the account is activated. Also, among the power, or like the powerful things that we can do within Keycloak is, for example, let's say I want to restrict a user from using my application. All I need to do is to click on disable, and when I disable a user, automatically the user no longer has access. So for example, if I try to log in with the user again, sign in, so like account disabled, contact your administrator. So like you see, it's only one click. Instead of implementing all this, it's only just one click. All we need to do is to click and do that. And here, by the way, you see when we validate each action, so like the list of the required user actions like gets reduced. So now when we re-enable a user, we can, for example, say that he needs to update his password. And let's save this change. And now if I try to log in again, I will be asked to update my password. So let's update it, password and then submit. So now we are logged into our account. All right, let's go back and continue exploring the different things that we can do within Keycloak. So we are not done yet, so don't worry guys. We still need to, we still can see so many things. So here, let's go back to this action required. So here, let's say every new user, he needs to update his profile. He also needs to verify his email. And for example, he needs to update the user locale or verify profile. And we can give them an order, for example. So like, let's say first, before updating, okay, let's say also update the password. But first I want him to update the profile and then update the password, or like, okay, so let's say update profile, verify email, update password. So it's a random order that I'm choosing right now, and then verify the profile. Okay, so let's test within a new user. I will log out. So here, user new, let's say, register. And here user new at yopmail.com. And here let's call it user, and I define the password, and then the password. I need to agree on the terms and conditions and click register. Okay, so I just mixed it. So here first name, and this is the email. All right, so I need to define password again. So password, I accept, and then register. So as you can see, the first thing that we need to update our account information. I click submit. So the next step, as we defined it in here, is to verify the email. So let's verify the email, and here let me use just the user. And now if I click on this one here, the first thing that we need to do is to update the password. So every time, like, you can play with the flow, with the order, you can play with really everything within Keycloak. And the most important part is that you don't need to implement any of this. All you need to do is to integrate Keycloak within your application, and you saw the integration is super easy and straightforward. And then you have all the power of Keycloak, and all you need to do is to play with it. So now we have a final tab, which is policy. Let's not go to this direction right now, because it's also an advanced topic, and we will try to cover it in a different video. So also, like in the beginning, I didn't think about going this deep within Keycloak, and then I said, okay, it's really worth it. Keycloak is super nice, and like personally, I'm super fan of Keycloak. So yeah, I'm trying to give you all the information that I can. All right, now I want to answer one question that I saw. Okay, so like honestly, I think I saw this question at least 100 times in the comments. Okay, so the question is how to mix social authentication or OAuth 2 within JWT. So when you use Keycloak, the integration integrating social login is just one click. Well, not exactly one click, it's just few clicks. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that. So now here we have identity providers. So here we see that we have all this list of identity providers. So here, this is the user defined. So we can use use OpenID Connect or Keycloak OpenID Connect, or OIDC, or like OpenID Connect is also known as OIDC, XAML v2, and so on and so forth. But we can also use social. So first, let's enable GitHub. This one, and all we need to do is to provide a client ID and a client secret. Okay, so here you can display the rest of the information, and all you need to do is to go to GitHub and create an application and get the client ID and the client secret and just add it in here. All right, so let's click on save. Now if we go back here, refresh the page, boom, magic. So as you can see here, we have the GitHub authentication. Okay, so registering, like unfortunately we cannot register within social applications, but I think when you click on register, when you click on login or sign in with this one, if it's a new account, I think it will be automatically considered as a registration. So here, since we don't have a valid client ID and a client token, that's why we are receiving this 404. So let's go back and enable more of them. So let's add a provider. Let's say, for example, Google. So client ID and client token. Here, like for each provider, if you need more attributes or more information, all you need to do is to provide that. So now magically we have Google already enabled in here. So if we go back, for example, and enable let's say PayPal, client ID, client secret, and now nice. So this looks super nice, super easy to integrate within Keycloak. So now your application supports so many things, supports like social login, supports a lot of things, like you can configure and play with the configuration really the way you want. All right, so now once you are done with configuring your application, your front end, back end, configuring the realm, configuring the different options and settings, and so on and so forth. So you are just trying or testing things locally or on a dev environment, for example, and you want to replicate these changes to another environment. For example, let's say you are playing around with Keycloak locally, and then you decide, okay, so this is the configuration that I want, and I want now to replicate or to take this configuration from one environment to another. So here I will give you the solution how to do that. So what we will do is, first we will export the configuration of our Keycloak. So here, let me refresh again. So now I need to use the email address since I changed it before when setting the email address. So now what we want to do is we want to extract the configuration of our realm. So here, by the way, in the realm settings, so the display name, let's call it Book Social Network, and let's hit save. All right, if we refresh, so here we see that we have Book Social Network. All right, so now we need to export the configuration. So since our Keycloak is running on Docker, so how to do that? So here, let's go back and open a terminal. Let me make it full screen. So here, first I need to run the command docker ps. So with this command, I need to pick the ID of my Keycloak. So I will copy this one. Then I will let me clean it, and all I need to do first is to do a docker exec -it, so for interactive terminal, and then the container ID, and then /bin/sh. So now I'm inside the container. So here I'm in the root folder. So here, if I do ls-l to list what I have in here, so here I have a bunch of folders. So my Keycloak resides in this folder called opt. So here I will navigate to /opt, and then if I let me clean, and if I ls-l again, we see that we have a folder called Keycloak. So let's go there. And inside this Keycloak, let me ls again so I can show you everything. So here we have a bin folder, configuration, data, libraries, license, and so forth. Also, we have themes in here. So I can also create a dedicated video how to update or how to change the theme for Keycloak, or even we can contribute together on an open source project how to create themes for Keycloak. All right, so I just wanted to mention that. So now we need to navigate inside the bin folder. And here, if I ls, we see that we have a bunch of shell script files. So among these, we have this kc.sh. All right, so now in order to export the configuration, we need to use /kc for keycloak.sh, and then we want to run the export command, and then -file, let's call it Book Social Network. So like I want to export my configuration to a file called Book Social Network, and then also I can specify the realm. So specifying the realm is really a good practice because, for example, locally I can create many realms and each realm is used or dedicated for a different application. So for that I can specify the realm. So our realm is called Book Social Network as well. And all I need to do is to hit enter and let the script run, and it will export my configuration to a file called Book Social Network. So here, if I do ls-l again, we see that we have a file called Book Social Network. So now all we need to do is to connect to Docker and copy this file from Docker to our local machine. So first, let me exit the container. So now I'm back to my local machine. So here all I need to do, since I already have the container ID copied, so all I need to do is to execute the command docker cp for copy, and then docker container colon, and then the path of my file. So I know it's under /opt/keycloak/bin, and the file is called Book Social Network. Social Network, and where I want to copy this one. So let's say, or let's assume, for example, let me reduce this one a little bit, and here let's say that I want to create a folder and call it Keycloak, and inside it I want to create another folder called realm, for example. All right, or config, or like you can call it whatever. I want to export it to /keycloak/realm. Now if I execute, so we have successfully copied this file from Docker to here. So now if you see this, we see our book social network configuration. So here, for example, if you remember, we created a user called alibu@yopmail.com. So this is the user, and the user, like, this is the username, email, and so on and so forth. And also we created an API or a client ID with the name BSN. So it's all in here. Now all we need to do, like, to move from one environment to another, is to import this configuration to another Keycloak instance, and we will get all the configuration. Also, I will attach this book social network configuration with the code. So like this, you have it, and you will find everything in a separated branch. I will call it Keycloak integration. Alright guys, so this is the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned from it. So now I'm sure that you are becoming, or on the right path to become, a master of Keycloak. So in the coming videos, if you need something else, let me know in the comments, and I will bring more and more videos about Keycloak and how to configure and how to do a lot of things within Keycloak. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead, share it with your friends, and let's spread the knowledge. And also, if you're new to my channel, just go and click on the subscribe button, and let's help improving and growing this channel all together. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.